Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. We are so happy to have you join us today for our parent and family webinar. This one is on navigating academic pressure, embracing stress as part of growth. My name is Mikkel St. Germain. I am the Director of Parent and Family Engagement here at Brown University, and it is a beautiful sunny day here in Providence. We have a great group of folks to speak with you today, both my colleagues on staff as well as some students who've joined us today. Right now we have about a little over 30 folks joining us and the number is climbing. And we are recording this, so if for any reason you need to hop out at any point in time or you want to share it with someone else in your family or your student, this will be recorded and posted on our parent and family website where you registered. This is the third in our series. We had one on study abroad and on career services last week. Those videos are posted at this time, so you can go watch those if you'd like to after this one. And then on Thursday of this week, we will be speaking about commencement. So we hope you will join us for that, especially senior families. Those who aren't looking to graduate, we'll do it again next year, so you can come for that one. A few other bits of business before we get started. At the bottom of your screen, there is a Q&A button where you can submit questions to our panelists today. We did receive a number of questions in advance of today's webinar, and we've incorporated that into our presentation. However, if you have questions as we go along, please feel free to use that and send us questions, and we'll try and get to as many as we can today. We also have a live captioner with us as well, who is writing the captions for us live. And if you need to access that, just press that CC button at the bottom of your screen. So I think we're at the point where we can start getting ready. One more note is at the end of this webinar, we will post a link to a survey. It's a quick 3-question survey, and I'd love to get your input on how we're doing and what we can do in the future to improve information that we're bringing to you. So let's get started now. I'm going to introduce the panel one by one, and each one's going to give you a little information about themselves. So our first panelist is Gilda Mosaday, Deputy Dean of the College for Academic Advising and the College. Gilda?
Hi, everyone. I've been at Brown since fall of 2022. In my role as Deputy Dean of the College for Academic Advising, I oversee our class year advising team, international student advising team, financial advising team. I also oversee the academic code and the Committee on Academic Standing. Excited to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Gilda. And next we have Dawn King, who is the Deputy Dean of the College for Curriculum and Co-Curriculars. Dawn?
Hi, all. I am Dawn King. As stated, I'm Deputy Dean of the College for Curriculum and Co-Curriculars, which means that I deal a lot with curricular decisions, department reviews. I also act as an academic dean. I've been in this position now only since last fall, but previously I've been at Brown actually since 2012, where I served as Director of Undergraduate Studies for Environmental Sciences and Studies. So also a lot of concentration advising under my belt.
Thank you. And Tanya Purdy, who is the Director of Be Well Health Promotions as part of the Student Health and Wellness area of Campus Life.
Hi, folks. Great to be here with y'all today. My name is Tanya Purdy, use she, her pronouns. This is my 9th year at Brown, and I've had the honor of working here with students as the director of Be Well. We provide individual, community, and policy level interventions to empower student health and well-being, and we'll talk more about that throughout the session.
Thank you, Tanya. And now our student panelists. So I will start with Camilla Murillo, and please correct me if I got that wrong, who is a Be Well peer educator, Meiklejohn, which we'll talk a little bit more about that, and a member of the class of 2026.
Hi, everybody. It's very nice to have you all here. Again, I'm Camila. I'm a junior. I study a double concentration in international and public affairs and Latin American and Caribbean studies. And I'm here as a peer advisor. I've done a lot of peer advising roles here at Brown, including a peer education for Be Well and a coordinator for SAPE, which is the Sexual Assault Prevention Education program at Brown. I'm also a Mecklejohn. I worked as an international mentor before because I'm an international student. And I'm also known as Maya's freshman roommate. So she's the next student. And yeah, I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you. And thanks for that segue. Our next panelist is Maya Renaud Levine, who is also a Be Well peer educator, class of 2026, and is joining us from an internship in New York City.
Hi, yeah, I'm Maya, and Kami's freshman roommate. I am also concentrating in international and public affairs, but on the policy and governance track, I'm a junior. I similarly have engaged in a lot of peer mentorship roles here at Brown, so as well as being a SAPE, I'm also a Mecklejohn leader and a Mecklejohn kind of doing the management and direct advising roles concurrently. Also, I serve on the Brown University Title IX Committee and the Brown University College Curriculum Council, so spending a lot of time with other administrators in University Hall. Great to be here.
Thank you so much, Maya. Yes, so we have a very varied and qualified group to speak to you today about how you can talk to your student or understand better that the academic pressures they might be experiencing on campus, and some strategies and ideas for how you as a family member or a supporter of your student can help them to navigate that. It's an area that I get a lot of questions about, so we're hoping this panel today will help parents to frame how they're thinking about this. Before we start to talk about all the resources and supports on campus, I want to talk about the different types of stress that students may experience that you may be hearing from your student. So let's start with Dawn, if you want to go through some of the different types of stress we hear about.
Absolutely. So there's, the expected academic stress that I think every student at Brown goes through every semester, especially with ebbs and flows of really stressful times like midterms or finals. There's also that grade pressure stress that students sometimes feel of, I absolutely have to get an A in this class or something along those lines. Our students are very active, not just with their classes, but in all sorts of extracurriculars. I mean, we have 2 peer mentors on the panel right now as part of their extracurriculars. And so sometimes it's balancing all of those things, that work-life balance. Sometimes there's social stress if, you've gotten a fight with your roommate or, something along those lines happen. External factors, obviously, things going on in the world that can absolutely stress students out. And then sometimes, and maybe, for this group in particular, there can be stresses coming from the family or from home. And I know, one of those, for me, I was a first generation student. And so I had all of these pressures and stresses on myself, particularly because I wanted to make my family proud of me. I wanted my parents to be happy. I know that's definitely kind of a first generational thing where I saw myself putting so much pressure on myself to get straight A's and do really well, even though, like, honestly, my parents didn't care. They were so happy I was just in college and getting a degree. But those are like some of the pressures I put on myself only in hindsight, knowing that, I wanted to make my parents so proud, and I was putting that stress on myself. And then sometimes, it could also be, things happening in the family. If a relative is sick, certainly we'll chat about resources here at Brown for that. But even chatting with students who have come into my office saying, you need to help me. Like, my parents insist on talking to me every single day from this hour to this hour. And I have all of these other, and how do I communicate that to my family that I love them, but I cannot talk to them on the phone for an hour every single day? So we kind of go straight to that academic and grades part, but there's actually it's really holistic, and each student has different kinds of stresses, and oftentimes it's throughout different parts of the semester.
You, Dawn, I think that's a good place to start, and we'll get into how this can be so individual to the student and and how we approach that. So now that we've outlined some of the places the stress is coming from, I'd like to ask the students some of the coping strategies that have worked for them, have worked with some of their peers that they've counseled. Let's start with Maya, if you want to go through some of your coping strategy tips.
For sure. I mean, I think the number one kind of lesson I've learned is to establish a routine. This seems like super simple, but there's a lot of elements that go into that. So when it comes to academics, when are you going to get your work done? With whom? Are you capable of kind of doing work alongside friends? Is it more helpful to do kind of class-specific study groups? How are you really going to kind of like protect that time that you need to get your stuff done? I think equal to kind of embedding your academic routine is having a social one and an extracurricular one. So I try to make at least one plan with a friend every day. Can I take a walk? Can I organize a call with a friend from home? And make sure that like that kind of, emotional social needs are also taken care of, and not kind of pushed out by the other demands. I think when it comes to extracurriculars, as we were talking about, students at Brown take on a lot. They are really passionate people who want to do as much as they can, but that can be really exhausting. And the amount of extracurricular kind of load that you can take on in high school is really different than what you can do in college. So I think really making sure that you're kind of preserving some of that mental energy for the 4 rigorous classes that you're probably also taking. And then I think, core to that is use Google Calendar, the secret weapon of all Brown students. I think a couple other basic things. One is making sure you really have established like personal kind of networks of support before the moments of crisis. It's hard to get to that moment when you're really overwhelmed and think, oh crap, like where do I go? So making sure you like have 3-point people that maybe you can call if you're feeling upset, making sure you're really aware of the resources, which I'm sure we'll go over throughout this session. Knowing who your academic advisor is, who your exploratory advisor is if you're first year, who your dean is, making sure you're in active contact with other peers in your department, stuff like that. And then my last little tip is like to really embed moments of joy where you can. I know that for me, I sing in the university chorus, which is not exactly a resume building extracurricular, but it's really important for me every day to be able to like, well, not every day, twice a week, to be able to like connect with music, which is something I've always done, connect with my peers, and really like have that as a grounding exercise. And make sure you have time so when it's snowing you can go out and enjoy it, stuff like that. I think that's really key to protecting your mental health.
Thank you, Maya. That's fantastic. Some great tips there. Camila, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, well, I agree with everything that Maya said. I think if I can add something is I've seen that a lot of students, the first thing that they drop out is usually the like sleep, eating, like the most healthier habits. And people prefer to like stop sleeping to like care about their grades more or be in more activities, but then they skip a meal. And I feel like having those like survival habits is one of the most important elements of having then a good mental health and like a good college experience in general. So I would say staying healthy is one of the most important things. Maya talk about a social routine. I want to add that finding some alone time is really important. At least for me, I'm a more introverted person that really needs like their alone time to recharge. And especially I think when you're going through college and you're changing so much and you're learning so much about yourself and you're like developing this whole new personality, having moments of reflection to really understand like what of those parts do I want to keep? Like how have I changed from like the first time I joined college to now? Like am I still the same person? Like finding those moments to really like reflect on who you're being right now and what things do you want to keep, what things do you want to bring back from the you of before, or what things you want to change. Those like key moments, it can be a few times a semester or at your breaks, just like reflecting on what you've been through and what you want to continue or drop. are really important. And again, I'm just gonna echo everything that Maya said. I think finding communities is one of the most important elements at Brown, and that can be through your personal identities, through your hobbies, like the chorus for Maya. Mine is a dance group that, again, I joined purely out of interest, not because I wanted like a career out of it. And then your assigned advisors, so like your Michael Johns in our case, peer support groups, all of those people are there and are going to be helping you check in on yourself constantly.
Thank you. So up to this point, we've been talking about normal stress, which is in the normal boundaries of a college experience. Now I want to ask Tanya, what are some signs that a student might be in distress beyond the normal level of stress? And how can parents identify it as more of an emerging problem rather than just normal discomfort?
Thanks, Mikal, and thanks everyone who spoke so far. Absolutely all true and brilliant information that's been shared already. So when we're talking about distress, we're talking about really prolonged stress that is impacting someone's health and well-being, or they're unable to do the things that they might normally do because of that level of stress. So higher levels of stress, overwhelming levels of stress, and it gets in the way of an ability to function. So, for example, Kami talked about sleep, right? So if you find that you are not sleeping, not able to fall asleep because you're stressed, because your thoughts are racing, that's an example of distress. We also think about sleep and forming healthy sleep habits as a protective factor so that it keeps you from moving from stress to distress, right? Some other things when it comes to distress, or if you're trying your normal coping things, right? So for Kami, she's still going to dance, right? But if Maya starts, and she's feeling good about it, but if Maya stops going and singing, right, and doing those things that she loves, that she feels passionate about, that's a sign that something more is going on with Maya, right? So all of those routine things, someone says, you know what, I'm not going to be a Micklejohn anymore, or, you know what, I need to stop, I start skipping classes. But it's not just about the academics, it's about if we have students who identify joy, connection, community, and they stop going to those things, right? They stop showing up to the identity centers, or to work, or to the places that bring them joy, or maybe they stop doing lunch dates with their friends, which also is a protective strategy, set that up. Those are all signs of overwhelming stress. And we know that stress is also connected to other physical health and well-being. So chronic colds is something that I think is really common if you're experiencing really high levels of distress. Anything that is really getting in the way of someone's ability to function normally, or their normal coping strategies are not working. So not only maybe Kami keeps going to dance, but it's not bringing her joy anymore. Right. So some of those things to think about, and I think we're going to talk later about the kinds of check-in questions that you might want to ask your students to kind of see if they're at that level. But I really want to drive home that stress is normal. I know that everyone on this call knows this because they've experienced stress probably already 5 times today. Normal stress, right? It's when it gets really unmanageable, when we can't cope, or when our normal coping things aren't working. That's distress, and that's concern, right? Other things are just like check in. No, like, oh, did you eat lunch with your friends today? Did you go to dance? Those are all the normal coping things. I'm going to stop there.
Thank you, Tanya. I know we could go on all of these questions, I think. Thank you so much. So let's turn now to resources. What resources are available to students to manage the stress of campus life and academic challenges? I'm going to start with Gilda to cover the academic side, and then we'll go to Tanya for the campus life side.
Yeah, so I'll start by saying, we have extraordinary students at Brown. That's no news to you all because you were their loved ones and parents. I would say, though, a lot of times when I talk to parents or alumni, even, I ask them to close their eyes and think of a person in their life that they go to for counsel or guidance, whether that's a family member, whether that's a mentor, a colleague. And inevitably, everyone always has someone that they go to for help or moments that they are concerned about something and need assistance. And so successful people choose to utilize resources. Successful people have someone in their life that they go to for care and counsel, and our students should be no different. I think sometimes there's a hesitancy amongst our students to be able to do it all on their own. Maybe that's what they're accustomed to, and maybe that is what they did to get here. But ultimately, one of the things we need to do to develop awareness and just development in the person is to encourage them to utilize resources. So on the academic side, you've heard a lot about advising. So we have exploratory advisors and Meiklejohn peer advisors for incoming students, whether that's a first-year student or a transfer student. Once your student declares their concentration, they get a concentration advisor who's a faculty member with an area of expertise in what they're declaring as their concentration. They also have tutoring that they can seek out for specific courses through the Sheridan Center. We have the Curriculum Resource Center where they can be assigned an academic coach. Academic coaches can work with a student on things like time management, study skills, all sorts of things as they balance their life both inside and outside of the classroom. We have the Writing Center, we have the Math Resource Center, really an abundance of things that students can utilize. I think that it's important that they are honest with their advisor in some of the things that they're experiencing. And it could be as simple as course selection, right? It could be, should I drop a course? Should I not? And it may be the difference of someone suggesting to them, well, have you ever thought of going to office hours? Have you ever thought of talking to your faculty member? And that makes the difference for them. And they're actually able to stay in the course. So I think that please, if nothing else, encourage your student to utilize all the wonderful resources that we have. And if they don't know where to start, have them make an appointment with their exploratory advisor or one of the advising deans in the college.
Thank you, Gilda. Tanya, can you talk about the non-academic side of our support system?
Absolutely. And I'll start by saying that all of the services that we offer are complementary. So we find so many students who are utilizing and working with Meiklejohn peer advisors or with an academic dean. They're using the Sheridan Center and they're using what we would consider our non-academic support services. And so we have a number of really robust peer education and peer mentoring and advising programs at Brown, and they speak to interests, passions, and then also identity. And so I'm going to start with our identity centers. In Brown Campus Life, there are a handful of identity centers where students can find community, connection, and belonging. And that really helps with them bring their full selves to Brown. So they don't have to compartmentalize. They can join something like our international mentoring program, our gender and sexuality peer counselors. UFly is an amazing program, and that is for undocumented first-gen low-income students. Any of those identities. These centers are all over campus and have really amazing community spaces also. So they're doing programming, they're building connection. Sometimes it's weekend, evening, lunches. And the spaces themselves, I think, form as a spot for connection and intervention, because I hear so many students over and over and over again say that they go to these places and it feels like home. And when you feel like you're at home somewhere, you're home away from home, it is definitely a protective factor against burnout and against de-stress. And Be Well, which is my department, we also have 5 peer education programs and serve as a home for students to learn skills and really help other students develop coping strategies for a wide variety of health concerns. The last thing I'll mention, which is not a peer program, is our student support services. And that is an office that has student support deans. This is non-clinical interventions. These are deans who are really looking at the full picture of what's going on with the student. So maybe it's both academics, maybe they have a sick family member at home. Maybe they also are managing a learning difference in the classroom and it's impacting their ability to socialize. And they're really going to look at that full picture, strategize, and think about what are the supports and resources that can be offered. So our student support deans are truly, truly, truly a wonderful asset that we have at Brown. And you don't have to wait until you're in a panic to use them. They will work with anybody who's experiencing any level of stress to really understand and prevent it from developing into something more.
Thank you, Tanya. That's a nice segue to our next question. So this is for Dawn. Can you talk a little bit about how we can help students to reframe their thinking about taking advantage of all the resources that Gilda and Tanya just spoke about? It doesn't matter that they're here if the students won't go and seek them out. What are your thoughts on that?
So I really appreciate that Gilda started off with saying, everyone has a mentor or everyone has that person you go to for advice. It's not weird. And I usually tell students, I actually try to reframe these because oftentimes going into office hours, even something as minimal as going into chat with a faculty member, which we love, by the way. I really mean that. We actually do like it when students come into our office hours just to say hi or if they have a problem. It could be a sign of weakness, right? Students view that as no, and especially for students throughout high school who have always been able to kind of do everything by themselves without some supports. There are some high schools that really don't have a lot of these supports. And I reframe that and I say, look, if you get a job, right? Let's say Tanya, who has a job here at Brown, and Brown University says, hey, we'd love to give you $1,500 to take this class. Well, you'll get certified in X, Y, and Z. That is basic 101. Most of us would jump at that opportunity, right? To utilize that free resource that will help with our professional development skills. And that's exactly what these services are. And I oftentimes will point to the Writing Center. And a student might think that's a sign of weakness. I need help with my writing. And I say, look, there are very successful professional writers. And do you know how much money they pay for somebody external to edit and look over their writing, which every writer has, that editor? It's really expensive. Like, take advantage of this opportunity at Brown. And I think a lot, even with the Be Well program, right? There are so many workshops and folks you can talk to. So I always try to reframe it. Especially like I said, I was a first gen student. So I was one of those students who thought it seemed weak if I had to quote unquote ask for help. And it's really not that. It's really honing in your skills and taking advantage of all of these resources that Brown has to offer.
Thank you. So let's continue on this thread. Gilda, can you talk about how this experience might look different to each student and the individualized approach that Brown takes towards providing these supports? I think earlier in our conversations before we started, we said that even alums, if you're an alum on the call, this may look different to you too, because we do really try and tailor this to the student.
Yeah, that's right. So essentially, each student's needs may be different. And so that's why it's critical that when students come talk to an advisor, they're going to be asked a lot of open-ended questions. So oftentimes a student may start out by saying something, asking something that's kind of considered their presenting issue, but that's not really what they need assistance with. So it's my job to ask those questions of them to see, is there a connection with the things that they're saying? Is there something that they've maybe been doing that hasn't worked for them or has worked for them? And how can we institute that in the current semester? And so it's really critical that We learn about the student, we establish that relationship with them, and then provide them with resources that are personalized. And so I think as parents, and I'm a parent, it's really easy to be like, well, when I was in school, we did this, or you should go to the library and do that. But things are changing rapidly. Like universities are a dynamic environment. That's one of the reasons I love working in higher ed, and I'm sure you all as well. And so wanting to really help the student, it's not always as simple as having a quick conversation. It may be that you're meeting with them on a weekly basis to understand their needs and then connecting them with the resources that makes the most sense based on that. I also think that if your student contacts you and describes a situation that they're navigating or a difficulty that they're having, it's really important to kind of hold your judgment. So at orientation, I jokingly say to parents, like, when your child calls and says that they're having difficulty in class, don't respond by saying, I told you not to take that class. You shouldn't have registered for that. What were you thinking? No, like, we want your student to explore. We want your student to, shall I say, even fail at times. That is part of the competencies that we're looking for folks to develop, the resiliency, the ability to understand what their interests are, and being really intentional. You heard Maya talk about it's not great to do all the things. And we have a lot of students wanting to do that. And I'd much more prefer to see students being intentional about their choices. And that way they feel less anxiety and less stress about the things that they're choosing to do. And so when you hear them talking about the difficulties that they're having, really listen and try and get as many details from them as you can so that you can connect them with the appropriate resource that we've covered here today.
Thank you. So at this time, I want to ask the students to help us understand how students learn about these services. So Camila, can you talk about where a student would actually hear about this? This is one of the questions we got in the registration is, how's my student hearing about these resources? How do they know that these exist? And I'm going to put up a slide while you're talking too.
Yeah, of course. Well, I think it really depends on where your student's journey is starting at. So, for example, during orientation week, there's a lot of talks about all of these resources, but sometimes students, just go through those and they need extra time to assimilate that, right? So just know that by the time that students went through orientation, they should have some idea of at least the most important resources. So, for example, like key emergency services that are at the back of their ID. Like all of those things are mentioned there. But I think it's really important to understand that now that time has passed, they're probably like, for example, right now for a lot of first year students, they're coming back from break, they're realizing a lot of the new stresses, like where do they start at that point, right? And I think what I find that is helpful for me is to think of my support network and to really make it as holistic as possible. So, for example, starting with peers, something that I've really gained from the communities I'm in is a range of friends or classmates that are from multiple classes. And I think that's super important to have. And if you can encourage your students to join any groups that have a range of people from different class years, it's really important because sometimes those upperclassmen are going to serve as really great mentors, and they're coming in from a different perspective than an assigned advisor because they're coming in as friends. So sometimes they're the first person that a student can contact, right? So we have peers, we have the assigned advisors, that includes the exploratory advisors, right? That can be a professor that you're assigned to, your Michael John. I also really like to include in my support network a professional. And that means like, as Tanya was talking about, like the student support services, sometimes we can talk about our friends, we can talk with our friends about like the pressures that we have, but sometimes they're not equipped to handle a lot of our mental stress. And so I think it's really important that you as a student also realize what your peers can or cannot handle. And so having somebody like, for example, a CAPS psychologist, which is the psychological service office here at Brown, or if you're dealing, for example, in my job as a SAPE, we deal with a lot of people who have experienced sexual violence. So talking to one of the share advisors, which are professional confidential advisors that can deal with sexual health emergencies, that's different than talking to a peer, and they're going to give you way more information because they're actually professionals on what they're doing, right? So I think if you have a combination of peers, of your professors, assigned advisors, Michael Jones, like all of the academic resources, health professionals or mental health professionals, you're going to be able to get the widest amount of information as possible at the time that you request it, right? But I think that's, as Dawn was saying, the most important thing is that you as a family let people know that it's okay that they can request these services. I personally think of it as, just as I have in my resume a section of skills, the skills that I'm getting by going through these peer supports, by asking for help in CAPS in the Sheridan Tutoring Center, like all of these things are going to be skills instead of weaknesses that I'm building up for not only my career, but also my life. And so having the students start at that point of confidence, I think they're eventually going to find those resources on their own.
That is such great advice. Thank you. So we've talked about the supports that are on campus. Let's talk about you, the parents and family members and friends. Gilda, can you talk about how the folks here can have these conversations with their students about the academic and other pressures they might feel on campus?
Sure. So I think there's kind of two sides to this. One is the conversation that you have with the student. One is the conversation that you have with the university. And I'll start with the latter first. So I should mention that your student's educational record is protected by a law, which is called the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, or FERPA. And so what that essentially says is that Brown can't share detailed information with you about their academic record unless the student gives us permission to do so, because they're adults now, they're 18, and so it is their private record. But as far as having the conversation with the student, I think it's really important that you ask a lot of questions, listen actively to what they're telling you. Again, refrain from any judgment or, saying to them, well, this is what, it was like when I was in college. All of these things, there's so many varying factors or circumstances that may be at play. I know as advisors, when we're advising students who are in the same concentration, taking similar introductory courses, the advice that we give them often varies, even though it's in the same academic department, right? And so I think once you've been able to have them tell you what's going on, and oftentimes that's difficult too, right? You may be asking your student questions and maybe getting one-word responses. And so what I often tell parents to do is just ask more detailed questions. So instead of just saying to them, how's shopping period going? Good, great. What courses are you shopping right now? Are you thinking of taking 4 courses? Are you thinking of taking more than that? What are you, just asking a variety of questions to try and get to some sort of understanding of the concerns that they may have, and suggesting to them things that they've done in the past that has proven to be successful, I think can be something that's helpful, because oftentimes our students are feeling a little bit of that competition amongst their peers. They may be adapting what they're doing based on what their friends are doing, but that may not actually be helpful to them. And so you oftentimes have that insight as their parent in knowing what's been successful for them. And so reminding them of that. Like if they are someone who really needs 8 hours of sleep a night, just because their roommate's only getting, 5 hours, 6 hours, which we wouldn't recommend, and they're modeling that behavior, that could be the one thing that they change that really makes all the difference.
Thanks, Gilda. That's a great segue, because my next question is for Maya, and it's what are some things that parents, just let's add on to what Gilda already gave us, to things parents can do to help, and then maybe things that aren't so helpful that parents do sometimes.
For sure. I think the obvious thing to acknowledge is that your child going to college marks a really big transition in your relationship. And it's important to kind of have that conversation preemptively. So before I left, I sat down with my parents and we talked about how often are we going to be in communication? What's actually reasonable? Setting a time, right? My schedule went haywire when I got there. And it was really helpful to have a weekly date aside so that, you know, if everything is in shambles, like I still have that. I think also having, and this is a kind of harder, more nuanced conversation, but having a discussion about kind of what is going to be the role of the parent going forward in terms of support versus accountability. So, you know, my parents stopped checking my homework after like second grade. They're not going to start doing it in college, but maybe for your student, it's helpful to be able to kind of check in, to have your parents read over big essays, whatever kind of works for your relationship, and encourage your student to set the boundaries that they need. For me, getting like nagging comments about what work, what classes, what times is if anything makes me just want to quit overall, you know? But for some people that can be really helpful. So I think like really setting that preemptively. I would also say that, and this can be difficult, but fundamental to the ethos of Brown is kind of this embracing of the unknown and the challenging and potential failure. And it can be really hard to watch your student struggle with that, to not necessarily have a direction for the first 1-2 years, but support them through that, you know? The first month at Brown is not the time to tell them to pursue an econ degree, and that's the only way they're gonna have a successful career. I think that like talking through what does interest them, what excites them, and really being there for every step of that process, is the way to help them perform better and really protect your relationship throughout that process.
That's fantastic. I don't know, does anybody else on the panel want to add to that? All right, Maya, thank you for that. We've had some really great questions come in from the folks on the webinar. Let's start with those. I'm going to start off with you, Tanya. We had a question about what would a student's first point of contact be to figure out how to juggle everything. So maybe there isn't one specific hot button issue for a student, but they really could use some help sort of juggling, you know, an overwhelming schedule or a bunch of different competing things that are happening at the same time.
Yeah, that's really, it's a great question. I think that in some ways I want to say that there's no wrong place to start. That, you know, reaching out and making a connection and a contact. You might, for example, go to the Curricular Resource Center, which is an amazing center, part of the college, and offers some time management workshops that I think are fabulous. And so I mentioned that one as a first go, because maybe a student will see a flyer, or on Instagram more likely a post about a time management workshop, right? And they might connect with a peer advisor. They might just find a tool, a worksheet, an app that someone's mentioning that works really well for them. But there are also times where your first place that you start, you might find out is not the right place for you. That's why we have such a diversity of resources. This is not one size fits all. So I think going to any of the resources that were on the slide, Mikkel's been putting so many of them in the chat. I think starting where you feel most comfortable going is great, because that's the place where that student is going to be willing to ask the questions that they really need to ask. They might feel most comfortable at the Sheridan Center because they know a graduate student who's working there. They might feel most comfortable in Be Well because their freshman roommate is now a peer educator there. It's okay to start where you're at, where you feel most comfortable, where you feel you can ask the question you have to ask. And I have full confidence that people who are doing this work work in helping our students are going to make really warm referrals and connections to get them to the next place. So I don't think that there's a wrong place to start, I think is what I'm saying. And I also want to add that the first place you go is not the only place to go. It might not work on your first try, and that's okay. That's why we literally have 50 other places for you to try.
Thank you, Tanya. I think that's great advice. We had another question just come in. I'm gonna, I think, direct this to Gilda to start. This is about a student who really enjoyed a class until they ended up with a B. And this sounds like it was a, a surprise, and it caused her to sort of doubt herself on that. So the question from the parent is, how can I get my student to prioritize enjoyment over perfection?
I love that question. Yeah, we oftentimes are saying it's about the learning experience. It's about being well-versed in a lot of different disciplines. And maybe that particular discipline wasn't the one course that the student was most interested in that semester, and they earned a B. And guess what? A B is a great grade. It's astonishing to me sometimes how many students we have who want to retroactively drop a course in which they've earned a B in. They would rather not get credit and negate all of that work that they've done over the course of a semester for fear of a B. And I'm here to say that we have students going to graduate and professional school, working in all sorts of fields with B's on their transcripts, and dare I even say C's on their transcripts. And so I think there's a bit of peer pressure at Brown, where students don't believe that there are other students who get anything except for A's. And so if you're trying to encourage your student to really have a love of learning and not be so obsessed about being perfect, students do have the option of taking any course here, even those courses for their concentration on a pass, no pass basis. So that may be something that they would be interested in doing. And there's always the opportunity to go talk to faculty during office hours to ask them, what could I have improved on? Not what do I do to get an A, which is a lot of times the way students phrase that, but really just like morbidly curious. I earned a B in your course. I really enjoyed the material. Can we talk about what I could improve on? And that's where the learning comes in as well, because if they are really interested in that subject area and they want to take additional courses, upper level courses as a continuing student, they're going to want that information in order to improve their performance the next time. And I think students, they may be uncomfortable going to the faculty member and having that conversation, which is another great reason to come talk to your advisor, because I role play a lot of times with students and I pretend that I'm the professor, and then we have that conversation. So yeah, but I love that. I love that question. It's great.
Thank
Can
you,
I
Gilda.
also add something just very briefly that I oftentimes tell my students who, as Gilda, said, there are many students who freak out with a B or a C. I always tell them a little secret, and I say, you don't know this yet, but I do. Maybe if you're going and trying to get into a top medical school, somebody's going to look at that undergraduate transcript, maybe for your first job, but for the rest of your life, nobody is going to ask you for that undergraduate transcript. And for all of those in the audience, like really take some time to think, when's the last time somebody asked me for my undergraduate transcript? It doesn't happen. Not even when we're hiring faculty, we don't even ask for undergraduate transcripts. And so I think students also think this is going to hang around their neck like an albatross for the rest of their lives. And quite honestly, 2 years after graduation, like you might as well burn it, because they're going to look at your grade, how you did in grad school. They're going to look at how you performed at your job, but they are not going to ask for your undergraduate transcript. And so it really, really is about the knowledge building part that you're going to carry with you, and not the A, B, or C that is on your transcript from 20 years ago.
Thank you. I don't know, students, do you want to add anything there?
Yeah, I wanted to add, I don't think we've talked a lot about the Career Center as well, but I think that's also a really great resource. I think, again, for a student, it really depends not only on what the information, but like who's giving them the information. And so I think if your student is really scared about like that B and how it's gonna affect their grad school applications or their like job chances, you can tell them, but if you can also refer them to a career expert who's also gonna tell them the exact same thing, it might be annoying to you as a parent because you know what the answer is. But I think the Career Center is a great also resource that students can access. Again, all of those consultations are free for students, as well as most of the resources that we've talked about. And having those career counselors, they can also be peers, and there's also professional staff there to tell them that it's going to be okay, to even like encourage them to try that subject or concentration as a potential career, or tell them what the options are to combine that with another interest. They're a really great resource to have to add that to your like support pack, if that makes sense. And then the other thing I wanted to say is that just because a student is taking a class for SNC, it doesn't mean that they can't access all of the other academic resources that they're taking. So for example, if you're taking I took French SNC because I hadn't taken it since middle school. And I took the placement test and I got French 400 and I was really scared, but I decided to take the class and I still booked a tutoring session with the Sheridan Center. And even though that was not going to count for my grade, I still put probably the most work that semester for that class, even though it was SNC. So again, putting a class pass fail or for a grade doesn't reflect the amount of effort that you have to put to that class or how much you care about that class. It really just depends on like the amount of knowledge that you have going in, how comfortable is that going to make you feel with the rest of your other classes work. But all of the academic resources are offered independently of if you're taking that for a grade or SNC.
Thank you. That's a good point. We also do have a recording of our Career Exploration Center webinar. So if you want to learn more about the resources there, that's on our website. We had a question just come in about leave taking. I guess I'll start with Gilda on this one too. Does Brown allow students to take a leave to improve academic skills and come back later? And what are the pros and cons of this option?
Kind of, yes, we do. So there's two types of leaves at Brown. There's a personal leave and a medical leave. Medical leaves can only be approved by the Student Support Services Office, and such as the name, states, you essentially need an underlying medical issue, which requires you to take some time away from your studies to address. And so you get approved for a medical leave, and then there's a clearance process to return from that leave. Personal leave, students can take for a whole number of reasons. So I've had students take personal leaves because they want to travel, because they have an internship that they want to pursue full time, because they are taking care of a loved one at home, because they are just feeling a little burnt out and want a break from school. So yes, if a student feels like there are some skills that they would like to acquire and want to take a leave, they can, but I'd want to learn more, because I actually kind of think like we have a lot of resources here that they could continue their enrollment while still acquiring those skills possibly. So again, it's an individualized approach. And so they would want to go talk with an advisor in the college about pursuing a personal leave.
Thank you. Now, this question that we got is about a student who's a junior, who is pre-med and has been really focused, as most pre-med students, on their studies. But I think this could apply to any concentration, really. A student who's made their junior year and they feel like they've been so involved with their studies that they've missed out on some of the opportunities to develop a friend group. This, I think, might be best for our students. Maya, can we start with you on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that my headline is "It's never too late." A really wonderful thing that I've realized about Brown, which is very different from my high school, is that people are always on the market to meet new, cool, interesting people. And they're willing to do so in any environment. I walk out of every class with a new friend, every club with a new friend. honestly, like trips into the bathroom, I walk out with a new friend. People are really friendly, and willing to do that. Obviously, you have to put yourself out there and take some steps, but I think the kind of general environment is a really positive one. Um, I would say that my number one kind of strategy for doing that is something Kami mentioned earlier, which is um, kind of using community activities and extracurriculars as like a launching point for that. And those can be kind of ranging from more academic ones to more kind of fun. So there's intramural sports, there's a cappella groups, you could join a musical, a play, kind of depending on your level of time commitment. And a lot of these are kind of outfitted with social events. So, the chorus will have dinner after a concert together. A lot of the community groups also have like events. There's bonding sessions are part of it. They'll have movie nights. So I think that like going to those and just making yourself available is a really great way. There's also kind of college run events. So there's dances. There are, our kind of notorious midnight organ performances. There's movie nights on the green. You can see those in your like today at Brown. You can look at events at Brown. These are all listed. And really like doing what you love, because then you'll encounter people who love what you love. Yeah, so I would say like just go for it.
Thank you. That is those are great tips. But if it's something that's underlying, so say like anxiety or depression, Tanya, what kind of resources are there for students who might be experiencing anxiety or depression?
Yes, and I saw another related question in the chat that I can address too. If there is things that we might consider not average or normal levels of stress, and maybe even some mental health concerns that your student's experiencing, which is also very normal, we have a wide variety of services available through Brown Student Health and Wellness. Health and Wellness is made up of 5 departments. Be Well Health Promotion, which I've talked about many times, is one of them. One of our other offices is Counseling and Psychological Services, and that is an office of psychotherapists and psychiatrists that provide mental health care for students. It is confidential, and students can access these services 24/7. There are options if someone is in crisis, and there's options if somebody really just is looking for routine therapy. Therapy is really so normalized right now and a part of what many young people are growing up with in their lives ongoing. And so if students are looking to establish those relationships and keep them going because they find talk therapy to be an essential piece of how they grow and communicate, that is achievable through counseling and psychological services in a variety of ways. In-person sessions, or there's also telehealth and teletherapy services. CAPS in particular is meant to be short-term and really goal-oriented. So someone can go in and say, this is what I'm struggling with, right? Very specific. And if someone is looking for long-term therapy that's not goal-oriented, but maybe working through some underlying issues or concerns or traumas, there are referrals in the community, and there are a robust network of providers right here in the community that students can access. One of the questions in the chat that I'll pick up on really quick was about students calling and hearing that their regular therapist that they might have been meeting with last semester is not available to meet with them on an ongoing basis right now. That is always true for the first 2 weeks and last 2 weeks of the semester, and really only for those weeks. We do that because at Brown we have shopping period where schedules are really all over the place for our students. And so we want them to not have their therapy appointment be in the way of them accessing all of the different opportunities and classes and clubs. And so it's more of a same day session. So someone can always meet with someone, but it's going to be same day. So it's making it vastly accessible for a wide number of students and really ensuring that there's no barriers to care during that type of schedule. So again, that's the first 2 weeks of a semester, last 2 weeks of the semester, the rest of the semester, they are going to be able to access their regular routine therapist and get back on that 2-week cycle. If that's a concern that's been brought to you by one of your students, please let them know they can call back. I think, what do we got? 1 more week of shopping period, and it'll normalize the way it did for them last year.
Thank you so much. Thanks for taking that one, Tanya. We are at 1 o'clock. So at this time, I'm just going to thank everybody for being part of our webinar. I am so grateful to Camila and Maya, our students who joined us today. While I am thanking everyone, I'm also going to put that link to the survey in the chat if people want to fill that out. And then I want to thank Gilda and Dawn and Tanya, my colleagues in the college and campus life, for their expert advice. If there's anything we haven't answered, please email me at family@brown.edu and we'll get that question to the right place. And again, and thank you to Media Services and our captioner today. We are so glad all of you could join us, and we hope you have a great rest of your day wherever you are in the world. Take care.